was positive. In the interest of time, we're just going to share one comment. So I'm quoting the student. Very interesting. I'm glad to have heard it because I never really thought about my values and how they could change in that way. I will keep it in the back of my mind now. So thank you. I know we don't have a lot of time, but happy to answer questions if we ever do have any time or talk offline. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary and Mary, for that. That was great. On to our next topic. Now we have Janet Stearns, the Dean of Students and Lecturer of Law at the University of Miami School of Law, and David Jaffe, the Associate Dean of Student Affairs at American University, Washington College of Law. Their topic is Substance Use Mental Health Education as a revision to the ABA standards on legal education. Janet and David?
Maria, thanks so much. And Rosemary and Mary Walsh, that was a great presentation. Thank you. What a great initiative. So the story is told of an attorney who comes along a shore littered with thousands of starfish. And the attorney sees a little girl at the edge of the water picking up starfish and flipping them back into the water. And the attorney goes over to the girl and says, "Little girl, what are you doing?" And she says, "I'm saving starfish." And the attorney laughs at her and says, "Little girl, I have built corporations by the thousands, and I've broken down others. I've transacted matters for millions and millions of dollars. I've helped families build up. I've had a staunch career in that regard. There are thousands of starfish along the shore here, and you are one little individual. How could you possibly make a difference?" And the little girl looks him in the eye and takes his hand and bends down and picks up a starfish and flips it into the water, and without losing his eye says, "I made a difference to that one." That is the starfish story, at least the attorney version of the starfish story. And like so many of us who are listening to this as deans of students, we're constantly on the call looking for opportunities and ways to make differences in the lives of our law students. Each year, Janet and I, and certainly scores of others around the country, are looking for ways to develop and support our students, law students, in terms of their well-being. And so the initiative that we've been working on and we'd like to share today is a furtherance of a practice that many of us have been doing on a regular basis that we would like to see codified, take hold, made permanent across law schools through the support of the ABA and others. And with that, I'm going to give the presentation to Janet.
Well, thank you, David. And let me just start by saying how much I treasure all of my student services colleagues through ALS, and I really, really miss seeing you all in person right now. I've missed you a lot since last year at this time. So as David said, we have been working together. As many of you have heard us speak in the past, we both are deeply involved with the ABA CoLab, and hand in hand between the CoLab and the ABA Law Student Division, we have written 3 times now to the ABA section on legal education, asking them to consider some changes to the standards to help promote our agenda of promoting more substance use and mental health education and resources in law schools. And so with the resilience of Stacey Abrams, we are continuing to push this agenda and actually hoping deeply that this year these changes can be codified. We think the environment may be right for this. So we want to let you know about the 3 changes that we have requested, and then we want to talk with you a little more about how you can help our movement and join our movement to actually make this into a reality this year. So and at the end of the presentation, we can certainly share more materials with anybody who wants anything in greater detail. So we've identified 3 sections of the standards that we think are relevant to our agenda. Our first recommendation goes to Standard 302, which is learning outcomes. And I actually think this dovetails very nicely with the presentation that we just heard from Mary and Rosemary. So Section D of the learning outcomes talks about professional skills to participate in the legal profession. And so we have identified in blue new language that we would like to see. so that we specifically identify as an outcome the tools needed to promote personal and professional well-being. This is part of what we should be teaching in law school. And in fact, this is also being discussed at the ABA level in terms of an amendment to the model rules on competence. So this is all part of codifying this important agenda. Our second recommendation goes to curriculum, and this is something David and I are talking a lot about. I'm very passionate about this. So trying to make sure that there is mandatory, not just voluntary, and this got talked about a little earlier today with Rhonda McGee, mandatory mental health and substance use education, at least 2 hours for all law students, possibly as a part of the professional responsibility course. And so we are asking for a comment and interpretation to the curriculum requirements of Section 303 to spell that out. And then I personally think that there's a lot of interesting work that we could be doing together to help put together a model lesson plan for what that mandatory education should look like. There's a lot of approaches to that. Our third recommendation goes to student support services. This is what we're all about in our section. And as we know, there is a basic requirement that we provide a number, academic advising, financial aid, and career counseling. All of our law schools do this. We want to make sure that every law school does have substance use and mental health counseling. Again, we recognize that might be on staff, that might be in coordination with university resources, and in fact, it could be partnering with the Lawyers Assistance Program in your jurisdiction. But you must have a plan and be able to document what that is to provide substance use and mental health counseling to all students. So these are our three core recommendations. Now, again, we have made these recommendations 3 years in a row, but now we're trying to figure out, and this is our little caption from, what is it, electric company, I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. So David, could you talk a little bit more about some of our advocacy efforts since this letter went in?
Sure. So I was honored back in October to be invited to join the ABA Council of the Section of Legal Education Admission to the Bar Legal Education Roundtable, and specifically to the table on lawyer well-being and professional responsibility, among other tables that were discussing proposals, potential amendments, things of that nature. Our particular roundtable was comprised of members of, in addition to the ABA Council, the Center for State Courts, the ABA Commission on Disability Rights, the ABA Law Student Division, the Clinical Legal Education Association, the National Conference of Bar Presidents, and the Society of American Law Teachers, and perhaps some others that I missed. For those of you who know me and know our passion around this topic in particular, you could imagine that I went in, looking for a fight and ready to pound on the table and take on all comers. And I was so pleasantly surprised, thrilled to find that the individuals around the table, to a person, were in agreement that it was time for these amendments to be strongly considered, if not implemented. Had a couple of, well-intended and really well-proposed conversations. So to Janet's point, for example, whether this should be applied specifically to PR or to professional responsibility courses, somebody made the fair argument, which exists at our school and others, that our ethics classes are not held until the spring semester of the second year, and perhaps too late to be getting some of this awareness across the board to our student community. So definitely some wrinkles to the proposals that we're talking about, but across the board, we felt that the hurdles that were being discussed, not necessarily supported by the group, but discussed around finances, around resources to implement this, around the competition that sometimes faculty cite for class time and things of that nature, that they were all surmountable. And the takeaway from this legal education roundtable was that everybody was very much in support. And again, that really, this was the time to get things moving in a positive direction, to follow the steps that are necessary with the ABA, with the House of Delegates, and to get these things finally before the proper authorities and approved as standards or amendments to the standards.
Right. And so as David has said, we ultimately do need to get through the ABA House of Delegates. And we are at this point waiting on what we expect over the next month or so will be some proposals. And as this process works out, we've seen other changes to the ABA standards, but hoping that our agenda will be a part of this year's package of proposals. We have spent a little time, and again, as we are trying to plot out this strategy, focusing a little more on the people who are currently on the council of the section on legal education. And I would invite all of you and the national network of deans of students, law school deans, faculty who all are part of our student services section to spend some time really thinking about who in your state is a part of this process and how can we all reach out and share our stories of the needs of our students, of the struggles of our students, particularly in this pandemic year, and the critical importance of really having substance use and mental health as a part of the ABA standards. And so I have these names, and again, I have this PowerPoint posted as part of the materials, but I would invite anybody who's interested in our movement to email David and me and to join us. And I keep open a vision that next year at this time, we will be able to report, in fact, that the ABA standards will have been amended.
And most of you probably know that these are just a small, here are the members, but a small listing of the council members and the ones that we thought, this is now the complete list. So we definitely, again, can provide that. You can find that on your own as well. But there's a lot of support that can be had there. And I would just end, Maria, let me know if I missed the countdown. Just very quickly, on a personal note, many of you know that Congressman Raskin, I get very emotional around this. Congressman Raskin lost his son last week, New Year's Day, in a very untimely manner. Tommy took his life, second-year Harvard law student. Jamie and I have been very close. He was actually my first law professor at school. We've remained very close. I was at his house with him several hours after this occurred, trying to console him and myself. I think we owe it to ourselves to get this language through, to get the standards approved, and to ensure that our students are having access to this information, to this education on a regular basis. We know that we're doing it on a practical matter fairly regularly across the board. We need to codify and ensure that this is happening at every school, every year, for every student all the time. So with that, I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David and Janet. And David, our hearts go out to you and to Congressman Raskin and his family for their really heartbreaking loss. Now we go to Professor Larry Krieger from Florida State University College of Law, who is going to talk to us about new science, the power of words, stressful to joyful. Professor Krieger.
Well. That's so touching. Oh my gosh. And you all are a treasure. It's a real honor to be with you. Boy. Well, I need my whole 10 minutes to adjust to what I just heard, but here we go. So, hot topic. Yeah, new science, I'm the science guy. So nice to be with you again. So my wife is so wonderful. She's a health coach and a fitness trainer, life coach, and she works with lawyers and law students, so she knows our issues. And she is probably more responsible for a lot of most of this than I am. For some reason, my screen is not forwarding and it's not escaping either. So I'm going to stop share and start that again. Let's go in this way and start a slideshow and see if that'll work. Okay, yes. Okay, so words have intense power. There's 1 minute, Maria. Sorry, there you go. The idea here, then, I think this could work at orientation too, but this is a kind of a new idea that could really change things fast. My other science is about values and needs and having the right priorities and not competing because it's not going to make you happy. That works, but it takes time. This happens fast because our words really do affect how we feel. So we all know these two students. Enough said, right? You have both of them in buckets full, right? Same law school, same curriculum, same professors, same dean of students, same job market, same everything. What's the difference? And I would suggest to you, probably the difference is their belief system, their personal messaging. We're going to go into the science about this. So here we go, positive belief system, negative belief system. First of all, I want you all to just take a moment. Let's do an experiential thing since we have 10 minutes also. Let's just take a moment, notice how you feel, take a nice deep breath, and then start thinking, I love my job. I love my job. I have the best job in the world. I see everybody that I can see is smiling. You notice how your feeling goes up. If you tell yourself that for 30 seconds, what happens? Your whole physiology is changing. Your brain function is changing. Now, if we were to go, my life sucks, my job sucks, right? Too much work, for a half a minute, it all goes down. So here's the positive side of it, and you have control over this, but we need to change our students to think differently about law school is the point here. I was a litigator for 11 years, though, by the way, so this is a big change for me. So when you have positive thoughts and beliefs, like we just talked about, you have positive emotions. All the stuff in black here happens in a cascade of positive effects in your brain and your body. You have coherent waves in your heart and your brain. You have lots of positive neurotransmitters and hormones. There's actually more than 1,000 biological changes that go with a positive emotion. And you're in that rest and restore function. Your immunity is full on, nice for COVID. Your digestion works great. You relate well, you think well, you remember well, you learn. And the bottom line, red down there, you stay youthful, you stay happy, you perform best, and you don't get sick. Okay, change those thoughts to negative thoughts and beliefs, and the exact opposite happens. Again, more than 1,000, it's actually 1,200 biochemical changes in that your body and brain, which is part of your body, of course, are responding to those negative emotions. And the result is the opposite, including your immune system shuts down, your digestion turns off, people have digestive problems, et cetera, you're in stress, and you can't learn, you can't remember, students fail the bar. And the bottom line, inflammation, pain, illness, low performance, and an early death. So, a truism that I think a lot of law students and lawyers ignore because they think it's all going to be stressful, which is what I'm talking about here. We need to change that. They think, well, it's all going to be stressful, but I'll be happy. No, it's actually impossible to feel stressed and happy at the same time. It's a different neurobiology. And we just saw the difference. So, choose your thoughts and beliefs carefully. You'll know what your thoughts and beliefs are, by the way. You don't have to think too hard. Notice how you feel. There's a middle step from joyful to mindful or from stressful to joyful in this sequence, which is from stressful to mindful to joyful. And it's just a matter of notice, how do I feel through the day? And if it's not so good, look at what am I thinking, because you're going to be able to trace it back. But the bigger thing is switch it to a positive thought like I just mentioned, okay? Because your choice really determines this for you, and your student's choice determines it for them. There's no way around it. It's a different neurobiology. So I asked a bunch of students, so describe to me in 1 or 2 words law school and law practice, and of course this is what I got. This is what you would expect, right? It's all about stress, competition, pressure, being at the top. I got to be the best. I'm going to have so much debt. So no wonder the students are walking into your door with this mindset. They're having those emotions, that biology, and those results, right? Depression, anxiety, a lot of illness, and so forth. The road less traveled, or the path not taken, Robert Frost, the other path made all the difference. What if we could get our students to think about, sure, you want to be in the top 10%, all that's true, But how about when you think about law school, think more about how much you're going to grow. Use these words instead. Get used to it. I'm finding myself, I'm becoming empowered and competent. I'm going to help people. Right? I'm going to get to work for fairness and justice and goodness. My life is going to be full of purpose and meaning. It's just as true as top 10% in law review and making partner. It's just as true. It's a choice. What road do you want to take? If you take this road, you're going to feel inspired and joyful most of the time. Your grades are also going to go up, as the research shows, etc. It's really the difference between optimism and pessimism, which has been researched a ton. Okay, so our big task, 2 minutes, I got all kinds of time here. We have a big task and a bigger task. Our bigger task is to change the law school and the profession. And we can do it starting from orientation. We have to change these expectations. Everybody comes in thinking, not everybody, 70% probably from the little survey I did. And if this is what they think, this is what they're going to do, and this is what they're going to get. And then this is what lawyers are going to tell them. This is what's going to happen when you go to law school. And it keeps, repeating itself. So we need to change the expectations. It's a big job. But we need to start at the beginning. I would start in orientation, get them to start identifying with the wonder of becoming a lawyer, the empowerment, the thrill of it all, and show them the other research that we've done. Doesn't matter what your GPA is, you can be a happy lawyer. It's out there. George Washington Law Review, 2015. Okay? And so we need to change our language, get them to be aware of their language, and it needs to extend to the profession as well as law school. Okay, then on the big task, which is for ourselves, it's sort of what I've already said. Start your day inspired and joyful. My wife told me a few years ago, do not get out of bed until you feel inspired. And I don't want you to stick around in bed. So get inspired and then get out of bed. Play your favorite music for 3 minutes. Dance around. Do something to start the day. And then joyfully and inspired. And then notice through the day, be a little mindful, how am I feeling? And then make those bridges to the positive. And here's a few nice little positive bridges to end. The top one is for us. The bottom one is to suggest to students when they go to study. What if let's take another breath and another moment. I feel so alive. I love my life. I love my job. Okay, and there are the ideas for students. So I'm going to write something up on this. I'll let you know. Thank you again. It's an honor to be with you all.
Thank you, Professor Krieger. I wish I could stay in bed until for all sorts of reasons. Let's see. So next we have Chad Christensen. And the document that I had on my computer just disappeared. So I'm going to go to the paper backup. Love paper. I'm dating myself now. From the Indiana University Bloomington School of Education. He is the project manager for LESI, the Law School Survey on Student Engagement. This year, LESI launched a module on diversity and inclusiveness and issued a report on the results entitled Diversity and Exclusion. If you haven't read this report, I strongly encourage you to review it on the LESI website. It really was startling to see in hard data what many of us anecdotally know is happening in law schools all around the country. And so Chad is here to talk more about this with us. Chad.
Great. Thanks. And is my slide showing up okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, thanks everyone. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm Chad Christensen. I'm the project manager for the Law School Survey of Student Engagement. And I'm going to talk today about a report that we published a few months ago on a new module called the Diversity and Inclusiveness module that schools could select to append to the end of our core survey, which focuses on a cluster of questions related to diversity and inclusiveness. And so I think it provides a good starting point of issues related to diversity and inclusiveness at law school. The title's a little bit of a spoiler if it's diversity and exclusion, because it is not it shows that they might not be the most inclusive environments and sometimes, but it's a great starting point to see what we're doing well and where we can improve upon. The survey itself last year, we had 68 law schools participate, and we had 13,000 law students respond to the survey. This report itself, though, focuses specifically on the 28 law schools that participated in the module, and that was a response of about 5,200 students. So why is this important? Well, that's probably 3 different presentations there, but for time, I'm just going to focus on these quick highlights. First, we know that decades of research shows that there's a host of benefits to these diverse experiences and having diverse interactions at the law school, such as critical thinking, abilities and intellectual growth, greater levels of overall satisfaction, enhanced development of important leadership skills, and greater levels of overall satisfaction. Right? We know then also that as lawyers, it's important that lawyers will interact in meaningful ways with diverse clientele, but to be able to recognize and resist instances of discrimination and harassment. And there's a very strong body of research for the law profession showing the importance and need for cultural competence to be successful in practicing law. So we have 3 different sections that I'll go over today. The first being institutional support, and then belonging, and then diversity skills. So I'll focus on a few questions here on institutional support. The first question that we asked students on the diversity and inclusiveness module was, how much does your institution provide a supportive environment for the following forms of diversity? There are about 4 or 5 questions there, and one of them being racial and ethnic diversity. So we know that support for diversity must begin in law school and begin with the institution. And so what we found, though, was that many students of color do not see their campus as supportive for racial and ethnic differences. So we see almost a quarter of Black law students nationally say their schools do very little to create a supportive environment, compared to just 7% of white students. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, 32% of white students believe that their schools do very much to support racial and ethnic diversity, compared to only 18% of their Black classmates. And then even more dramatic is this slide here, which shows that focuses on intersectional identity findings, and shows that Black women, more than any other race and gender group, see their schools doing very little to create an environment that is supportive of different racial and ethnic identities, compared to just 6% of white men. And so there's definitely some huge disparities as to their experiences and perceptions of support at their law schools based on race and ethnicity. And we see similar things with gender diversity as well. Men felt that their institutional support was very much on the survey answer, 39% compared to 27% of women, and then 9% of other gender identities. So this is important too. Students that believe that there is students who strongly agree that they felt valued by their institution. And so what we see here is there are, got a cute little puppy in the background who is devastated that, hold on one moment.
Can everyone relate? I know I can. I have 2 crazy ones at home. You gotta love at-home conferences and animals.
I am telling you, this has been like a madhouse this past hour, and I knew it was going to happen. She's super adorable, but relentless when it comes to not getting attention the time she needs to immediately. So, sorry. So as far as feeling valued, those who strongly agree that they felt valued by their institution. You can see that there again are some significant differences here as well. Not surprising when we see the lack of support for racial and ethnic and gender diversity on campus. Women and students of color across the board feel that their institution values them less. This also we see as far as students who think their schools do very much to create an overall sense of community. If we look at this by race and gender, one of the things, this is important because it's a student's perception of how much the law school creates an overall sense of community. And so this is, does my law school care in making this meaningfully and purposefully creating this sense of community? And so what we see here is that white students are more likely to believe that their law school emphasizes importance. 20% of white students think their schools do very much, where a much smaller percentage of students of color feel similarly. Perhaps most disheartening, 18% of Black students and 14% of Latinx students think their schools do very little to foster community. And so I will try and get through this next section real quick on belonging. And belonging refers to just feeling part of the community, fitting in, being comfortable on campus. And this is really important. We know from just a significant body of scholarly research that students who have a strong sense of belonging are more likely to succeed, more likely to learn. So there's a lot of positive certain indicators of success that relate to belonging. So one of the questions that we looked at was if students agreed that they felt part of a community, of the community. And that went from strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. So for students that agree that they're part of the community, we see here that 2 minutes left. Okay. 31% of white students strongly agreed, but much lower percentages of students of color. And you see this community aspect as well as related to gender. So much lower percentages of women feel that they're part of the community compared to men. She's back, friends. And you can see this straight across the board. And students who disagree that they feel comfortable being themselves on campus. And we can see that white students, only 12% believe that or disagree that they felt comfortable being themselves on campus, compared to much higher percentages of students of color. So I will wrap up with words here. And if you would like an unpuppied rendition of this presentation for this report, you can find our report on the LESI website. I think this was just a quarter of the findings, but as this is a quote from Meredale, our director, who states really importantly that those who are most affected by policies involving diversity, the very students who are underrepresented, marginalized, and non-traditional participants in legal education are least satisfied with diversity efforts on campuses nationwide. So there's quite a bit of work to do from that. And I will conclude there. Thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you, Chad. Such important work, and there's still so much to learn and do. Again, highly recommend that report to everyone. And now, last but not least, we have Taryn Petrick, consultant of inclusion and collaboration strategy and alignment at Cisco Systems. Before starting her role at Cisco, Taryn had 20 years of higher ed experience in a variety of areas, including residence education, social justice education, intergroup dialogue at the University of Michigan, where intergroup dialogue started, and diversity and inclusion. The topic she's going to discuss with us today is the power of words, creating inclusive environments. Taryn.
Thank you so much, Maria. And I'm so excited to be going after Chad. Number one, I have a foster puppy who will also probably be making its appearance. So Chad set the stage, as well as the work that Chad just presented through the LESI study really backs what I'm about to talk about, which is what do we actually do with what we know happens in our academic environments for underrepresented students across the board. Just so that we can do some level setting around language, because we may have all a different sense of what does diversity, equity, inclusion mean. Just for ground setting, diversity is the who. How we like to think about the presence of differences often includes diversity of thought, identities, ideologies. How do we put meaning to life? Sometimes in industry, diversity or diverse can be code word for Black, Brown, Latino, sometimes Asian, women. In this setting, especially in educational settings, we like to expand that to say it's across the board, and that the inclusion is the what. It is, we want folks to feel that they belong, like Chad talked about, and that we're really leveraging the differences to ensure that voices are heard and that we are getting the most from all of our students. And that we want to focus on the how. So if diversity is the who, inclusion is the what, the how is through equity. And we have to acknowledge that as a direct result of identity, that there are different needs within our community, and that all experiences are not equal. At some point, hopefully we can get to equality, but we're not there yet. So we have to focus on how do we ensure that we are understanding the needs of our community so that we are leveraging the experiences and creating access so that our students can be the most successful. So we're going to focus in on inequity and equity today. Really quick, this is a lot of language up on here. The University of Michigan Center for Research in Learning and Teaching has a concept around inclusive teaching, learning, and engagement. And what does that actually mean? And we have to deliberately, in all of our roles, whether we're student service, faculty, administrators, we have to deliberately cultivate a learning environment where all students feel that they're treated equally and equitably and have access to learning. And that we need to attend to social identities. We need to understand that identity is multifaceted, but that when we're thinking about systems of inequity, which we'll talk about in a moment, that we're really looking at a person's understanding around group memberships in relationship to society, around race, ethnicity, class, religion, sexual orientation, ability, citizenship, all those identities that make up who we are, that impact our experiences of feeling that we can succeed in law school and in turn in the legal field. And so how does inequity manifest in society? We see a lot of these words thrown out around, especially now as we're dealing with racism, sexism, classism on a national playing field, more so than we've ever seen. So this gives a nice little graph around how do all of our identities connect to the systems that create unequal experiences for our students that have a direct result on what the LESI survey just pointed out. So for example, when we think about age, the direct correlation would be around ageism. Gender identity and gender expression, the direct correlation to society and how that manifests is around genderphobia and transphobia. Racism and colorism, knowing that colorism is more of a global way of looking at how people experience discrimination as a direct result of skin tone versus racism, which is a very US-centric way of looking at putting people into categories. And you can go around the kind of globe and the graph here, looking at that connection. And that part of our ways of dealing and working with creating an inclusive environment is that we have to acknowledge that these exist and that individuals who have multiple marginalized identities, so exactly what was shown in the LESI study, for women of color, for trans folks of color, for individuals who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, and also may be of low income status or hold a religion outside of Christianity in the United States. That is what we call intersectionality, when people experience different forms of inequity through multiple marginalized lens. And we also have to keep that in consideration when we think about how do we create an environment. So acknowledging, not shying away from this, understanding what our role is as educators is really important. So we want to talk a little bit about what is equity mindedness competence look like? And we're going to dissect both race and gender. And this comes and is adapted from the University of Southern California Center for Urban Education. Originally for K through 12 education is now carried over into systems of higher education and beyond, around how do we actually be equity-minded when we think about providing the best environment for our students. Equity-mindedness look around race looks like we have an awareness of racial identity. We understand and have a sense and can say, I'm a white woman myself. I identify as a white woman. I've been doing social justice work for the past 20 years, and that means something. It means something when I have to understand what my power of privilege has in moving race work forward, and also know that my identity as a woman kind of coincides with that. We have to be able to use disaggregated data to identify racialized patterns. Oftentimes, especially when we look at inclusive environments, we'll just look at overall percentages without disaggregating what are the experiences of Black, Latino, Asian, women, veterans, people with disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. We need to disaggregate that so that we can really understand, are we at 90% feeling that folks belong, or are we at different levels of percentages based on our identities? Again, with the lessee showcased earlier. Reflect on racial consequences of take for granted practices. So we have to acknowledge that oftentimes we're maintaining the status quo in academia. I spent 20 years in academia, now moved over to industry, kind of plays in different ways, but that if we don't really unpack this, that we really are maintaining the status quo, and that we often take things for granted because of our own identities and not understanding the systems that take place. And then we have to use our agency to produce racial equity. So for those of us who do identify as white, being able to use our agency in the workplace within our level of influence in the organization to name what's happening, what we see, and the potential policies or procedures that we see that could be impacting our students' experiences. So what does lack of equity-mindedness look like? Claims not to see race, again, does not see the value of disaggregated data, unable to notice racialized consequences or rationalizes them as being something else. We see this happen often in the classroom, in our programming around students, and sometimes ourselves and faculty and administrators saying, oh, are you sure you interpreted that microaggression correctly? Folks didn't really mean that. Our faculty may have, they're trying their best to create an inclusive classroom, and all those little sayings are often ways that we rationalize things to make ourselves feel better. And so we have to be able to unpack that for ourselves. And then does not view racial equity as a personal responsibility. We have to own that. We have that great data. We have to own that our responsibility to create that environment for our students, and specifically students of color, again, underrepresented groups who we hold, is our responsibility. What this model can be applied to all of different types of marginalized groups. And so looking at gender really quickly, equity-mindedness is awareness of gender identity, and that gender is not a binary. Oftentimes we look at gender as being man or woman, male or female as it relates to sex, and not realizing that gender is a spectrum and people have multiple ways of identifying around gender. Again, using disaggregated data, and again, using that same type of model, we have to understand the experiences of women, of trans folks, non-binary, men, and how does that relate to other identities. Lack of equity-mindedness looks like we only have a binary identifiers for folks to choose from. That could be on our admissions applications. It could be on programming applications. It could be on any type where you have to check a box and there's only two identifiers. That is a lack of equity-mindedness. Pronouns and acknowledge. I even made that error when introducing myself. Oftentimes I say my name's Taryn and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. That provides an opportunity for folks who don't identify on the binary to invite in their pronouns. Does not see the value of disaggregating the data, and again, unable to notice consequences. So I have 1 minute. What do? Big slide. First of all, we have to do our own work, explore and understand our identities that hold power and privilege in society. We have to really be able to understand the historical injustices that perpetuate all these systems that we know are being upheld, that lead to our students not having positive experiences within our own schools. Continue to research and educate, pay attention to when we get nervous or scared and we could have paralysis through analysis where we overthink. Sometimes as educators, we put too much thought into analyzing versus doing and feeling, and then own our mistakes and that you're not expected to be the expert. Own, apologize, do better, and repeat. That's what our students need. Thanks.
Ooh, take a breath. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, everybody. And many thanks to all of our presenters, Rosemary Queenan. I have to turn my timer off. Rosemary Queenan, Mary Walsh, Fitzpatrick, David Jaffe, Janet Stearns, Chad Christensen, and Taryn Petrick. Thank you to the members of the section on student services and part-time division programs. And many thanks to all of you for spending this late afternoon with us. The slides used today are available through the AALS conference portal. Thank you, everyone.